No, do not tell me you were out here raving about these tamales. Meanwhile, they were made of real people, like actual human meat. Okay, breathe, because this one is actually disgusting. This woman, her name is Annabelle, and she ran a tamale stand for years outside of a Subway in Mexico City. Every day, customers would line up at her stand like, oh my God, she's back, not questioning why her meat is always so tender. Until one day, she runs out of meat and she can't afford to buy more. So instead of going to the store like a normal person, she sees a little girl. And this little girl is lost and she's alone and she's looking for her parents everywhere. And so Annabelle, she lures in with this fake kindness, telling her, hey, let me help you find your parents. But that was a lie, because she secretly unalives her and uses her body as meat for the next batch of tamales. That little girl was only victim one, and it never stopped. Over the next few years, she targeted dozens of homeless women with fake promises of food and shelter. At least 50 victims. 50. And nobody noticed because the food was so good, not knowing what they were really eating. That is so disgusting. And the only reason she got caught was because of a gas leak. Neighbors started smelling something really off, but it wasn't the usual tamale steam, so they called the cops. Police walked in and found the bones of a little girl laid out on the floor. Her flesh was completely gone, but her hair was still intact. These officers are horrified. I mean, I wasn't even there and I'm gagging. But after being arrested, Annabelle tried to say that a demon made her do it. She said the first kill was very hard for her, but after that, she just stopped feeling anything. And even telling the police, if it wasn't for that damn gas leak, I would have kept going. She's now serving 25 years in prison. That's it, 25 years for feeding humans to humans. I've seen people get more for stealing, but okay, I guess. Anyways, be a lot more careful around these food carts because you do not know what you're eating. Thank you for still being here with me, and as always, I love you guys. I'll see you in my next video. Group hug.
This woman pretended to be a 12-year-old girl. In 2024, a girl who went by the name of Gabrielle appeared in the city of Joinville, Brazil. She told people she had fled abuse and needed help. Members of a local church felt sorry for her and began to support her financially. Eventually, a family welcomed her into their home. The couple grew emotionally attached to Gabrielle and they treated her like their own child. They celebrated birthdays together, they paid for medical expenses, and they even considered officially adopting her. But Gabrielle wasn't a child at all. She was actually a 37-year-old woman pretending to be a 12-year-old girl. To maintain the deception, she would use baby bottles, had a comfort cloth, spoke in a high-pitched voice, and claimed that she had medical conditions that made her look way older than she really was. She allegedly convinced the family not to enroll her in school, and she would avoid conversation that had to do with paperwork or identification. And for 14 months, the family believed her story until a concerned relative contacted authorities and an investigation was done. As investigators were looking into her background, they discovered that she allegedly used multiple identities in different Brazilian states. She would convince people that she was a young victim of abuse and was subjected to ritualistic harm. To make the story believable, she would insert dozens of needles inside of her, and once an x-ray was done, it showed that there was more than 100 needles inside of her. On June 2nd, police arrested that woman at the family's home and she confessed to everything. She was charged with fraud and false identity offenses. As of right now, she remains behind bars while investigators continue to examine her past cases.
She fed her husband's semen to the children in her classroom. Cynthia Perkins was married to Dennis Perkins, who is a former sheriff's lieutenant. Both Cynthia and Dennis had millions of files of photos and videos of children being SA'd and abused. There were cameras all over the house, in private places like the bathroom, to record secret footage of their victims. Cynthia was a 7th grade teacher, so she would take photos of her students and then send them to her husband. Cynthia's husband would digitally alter those photos of her students to make them explicit for his own pleasure. Cynthia legally admitted to lacing cupcakes and desserts with her husband's sperm. Cynthia then fed the semen-laced cupcakes and desserts to the children in her classroom. Cynthia was sentenced to 41 years in prison, and Dennis was sentenced to 100 years. I genuinely believe that Cynthia deserved the same amount of prison time as Dennis. Honestly, maybe even more. But what do you guys think about this case? Nothing disturbs me more than looking at a photo knowing that that is the last photo of someone before they were mercilessly murdered. This is one of them photos. I'm True Crime Caitlin, and this is the murder of Anne Faber. On the 29th of September 2017, 25-year-old Anne decided to pull out her bike and went on a little bike ride towards a nearby small village. As she was out, she would get stuck in the worst rainstorm. The heavens opened and rain pounded down on Anne, getting her soaked wet through. Seeing the humour in this, she decided to quickly whip out her phone and snap this selfie, sending it to her boyfriend at around about 7 p.m. That would be the last that anyone ever heard from Anne Faber. On her route into this small village, Anne would need to cycle past a local psychiatric clinic, a clinic that was treating 29-year-old Michael P. Michael would watch Anne as she cycled past the clinic and decided to follow her. He would leave the clinic armed with a knife, a screwdriver, and a pair of pliers. He quickly managed to catch up to Anne, abducting her, dragging her off of her bike and taking her to a separate location where he went on to viciously rape her. In the distance, Anne was able to see another cyclist, and so hoping this person would be able to help her, she screamed and she called out for help. And in that moment, Michael decided that he was going to silence her permanently. Using the knife, he would slit Anne's throat before stabbing her to death. After committing the murder, he then pulled her body to a car that he somehow had access to and drove her to a nature reserve where he dumped and left her body. By the time that evening rolled around and Anne still hadn't returned home, her worried family made a missing persons report to the police. This missing person report would turn into a 10-day-long extensive investigation trying to find Anne. A group of volunteers who were aiding in the search would be the ones to find her coat. When this coat was tested for DNA, they were able to extract 2 DNA profiles, one belonging to Anne and one to Michael P. Again, Michael was in the psychiatric clinic and he was in the process of getting released from prison. He had been put in prison sometime before after he had viciously raped 2 other young girls, but now he is in the process of being released back into society. He would be quickly arrested and questioned regarding the disappearance of Anne, and after 3 days of intensive interrogation, he would make a complete confession, confessing to abducting, raping, murdering, and then dumping Anne's body. He would direct police to where they would be able to find her. Michael P. would go on to receive a sentence of 28 years imprisonment.
She watched her lover die, helped dismember his body, and later claimed she was the only one who truly loved him. Kelly Cochran and her husband Jason had known each other since they were teenagers growing up. They married shortly after high school, and for years they lived normal lives. But according to investigators, hidden beneath the marriage was a disturbing agreement made early in their relationship. If either of them cheated, they would kill the other person involved, and eventually that pact became real. In 2013, the Cochrans moved to Iron River, Michigan, where Kelly began an affair with her co-worker Christopher Regan. But when Jason discovered the infidelity in October of 2014, the couple decided to carry out the pact they sworn years earlier. Kelly invited Christopher to their home, believing they would be alone together. Instead, Jason emerged from the basement and shot Christopher in the head with a rifle. What happened afterwards became one of the most disturbing parts of the case. Rather than report the murder, Kelly helped Jason dismember Christopher's body using a buzzsaw. The remains are placed in garbage bags and buried in the woods. Christopher's disappearance left his family desperate for answers, while Kelly and Jason pretended nothing happened. But investigators soon noticed inconsistencies. When Christopher's abandoned vehicle was discovered, police found directions leading back to Kelly. As the investigators questioned the Cochrans, the couple appeared unusually calm despite the growing suspicion around them. Not long after, they left Michigan and went back to Indiana. Veronica. Then, in February of 2016, Jason Cochran was found dead inside the couple's home. Kelly initially claimed that her husband died from a heroin overdose, but investigators noticed signs of strangulation and ruled the death as a homicide. Kelly had deliberately given Jason a fatal dose of heroin before suffocating him. Later, she admitted to killing her husband out of revenge for Christopher Regan's murder, claiming Christopher was the only person she ever truly loved. As investigators continued questioning her, the case became darker. During interviews, Kelly made cryptic comments suggesting there could be other victims. Her own family believes she could be a serial killer, but without proof, this still remains a mystery. Today, Kelly Cochran is serving life in prison, plus an additional 65 years for both murders. What do you guys think about this case? Leave your thoughts in the comments below.
This woman burned alive the man who raped her daughter. I'm True Crime Caitlin, and this is Maria del Carmen Garcia. This case takes place in Spain, just outside of Alicante, and in October 1998, Maria is cooking some dinner for her husband and her 13-year-old daughter Veronica when she notices that she's run out of bread. Maria went to Veronica asking if she wouldn't mind popping down to the shop and picking some up, and Veronica was happy to do so. She slipped on her shoes and walked out the door. As Veronica was walking down the street, a neighbour of hers, 62-year-old Antonio Cosme, was getting into his car. Recognizing one another, Veronica and Antonio smiled and greeted each other when, out of nowhere, Antonio grabbed Veronica, dragged her to his car, forced her inside, and then drove away. He would drive Veronica to a secluded wooded area where he would horrifyingly rape her at knife point. Hours later, he dropped Veronica back off in her street, and before he let her out of the car, he threatened her, telling her not to tell anyone what had happened. However, by the time Veronica went back into her home, Maria was already frantic. She had only sent her 13-year-old daughter down to the shop to buy some bread, and at this point, she had been gone for hours. After some gentle pressing from her mother, Veronica broke and told her everything, how she was walking down the street and Antonio forced her into the car, held her at knife point, and horrifically raped her. Immediately, the Del Carmen Garcias went down to the police station to report this. Bruises, scrapes, and marks that were found all across Veronica's body supported what she was saying, proving that this horrible thing had happened to her. However, the local community weren't convinced. Antonio Cosme came from a very powerful, prominent, well-respected Spanish family, and due to his age as well, again, he was 62, the local community didn't believe that he could do something like this, and so instead of believing Veronica, they branded her as a liar. Despite this, however, Antonio was charged, taken to court, and he was handed a sentence of 9 years imprisonment for this. Over the next couple of years, the mental health of the Del Carmen Garcia family deteriorated. Veronica allegedly spent some time in a psychiatric hospital, and Maria fell into a deep depression. Shockingly, after only serving 5 years of his sentence, Antonio was granted the ability to leave the prison on several day releases, much to the disappointment of Veronica's family, who at this point had lost all faith in the justice system. On the evening of the 13th of June 2005, Maria is stood at a bus stop just outside of Alicante when someone familiar begins to approach her. This person leans over to Maria's ear and whispers, quote, "How's your daughter?" before walking away smirking. Maria stood in shock and disbelief because that person was Antonio. He was out on a day release and he was taunting Maria. Her daughter had suffered for years due to this man's heinous actions, and now here he is, released from prison on day release, casually walking down the street, heading to a bar to go for drinks with his friends. Blinded with rage, Maria stormed to a nearby petrol station where she picked up a container filled with gasoline. She made her way to the bar where Antonio was drinking with his friends, and in a flash she doused him in the gasoline, setting him on fire and burning him alive. Antonio would sustain 90% burns across his entire body, and he would succumb to his injuries in the hospital, dying a couple of days later. Maria would be arrested, and she received an outpour of support from her community. People would gather outside of the court and they would chant and cheer for her, a petition that was set up up had over 10,000 signatures for Maria to be let off with the crime. Despite all of the support and the petitions, they didn't work. Maria would be found guilty, and upon appeal, she would receive a sentence of 5.5 years. The judge in this case recognising that at the moment that Maria doused Antonio in gasoline and set him on fire, she wasn't in the right state of mind. At that very moment, she was temporarily insane. After serving her time, Maria del Carmen Garcia would be released from a prison in Alicante in 2018.
A high school coach just fatally shot his former student inside her own home before turning the weapon on himself. Her name was Gwendolyn Smith. She was only 17 and she just graduated from Bedford High School in Michigan like not even a month ago. She should have been planning college, buying dorm stuff, but instead on June 14th, this weirdo named Ryan Leist somehow managed to get inside her home. We still don't know how he got inside because there was no signs of forced entry, but when her stepdad came home at around 6 p.m., he walked in and saw his daughter laid out on the floor with multiple bullet wounds. And next to her was Ryan, dead too. Now hold on though, because this part makes no sense. It turns out Ryan wasn't even hired by the school. He was a coach at a local bowling alley that just worked with the school. So he wasn't actually part of the school staff, but the problem is he had been quit that job. So why was he still around Gwen? I'll tell you why. I mean, this is just my opinion, but it makes sense. I honestly believe that Gwen was about to expose this man. Her stepdad had recently caught Ryan messaging Gwen very inappropriate stuff. And that's not the first time this man has done that. After the murder, another student came forward named Kylie Thornton, and she said that Ryan was obsessed with her too. Like tattooed his name on her arm level obsessed. But Kylie said, quote, "We never dated. I never wanted to." She said he tried to sleep with her and her friends, that he'd offer to hang around parks and try to meet up with them. This guy is actually disgusting, but I believe that is why he targeted Gwen. But what breaks my heart is what Gwen's stepmom posted after she passed away. She said, "We are not supposed to outlive our children." That is so heartbreaking. Please say her name, Gwendolyn Smith. She was only 17 and she deserved to live.
See ya.
Right,
So,
we're told, I know what's going to happen to you now, mate.
Well, I know it's going to
We
happen
just-
when you go to prison, obviously, but again,
Why, what have you done? Have you done something to anyone else?
yeah,
What have you done?
I've murdered 4 people.
That is the moment when Damien Bendel confessed to slaughtering 4 innocent people, including a pregnant woman and 3 children. I'm True Crime Caitlin, and this is the Killamarsh murders. Terry Harris had just gotten out of a very long relationship when in early 2020 she decided to give online dating a go. This is where she would match and then meet Damien Bendel. The two got to know each other through texting and then FaceTiming before they eventually met. When they met for the very first time, they really hit it off. They really liked one another. Within weeks of their initial meeting, Damien would move in with Terry and her 2 children, John Paul and Lacey, in their home in Killamarsh, Derbyshire. What started off as an accepting, exciting, fresh relationship soon turned into a controlling one. Damien had expressed to Terry that in his past he had been in trouble with the police. He started getting into trouble with the police when he was only 13 after he egged a woman's house, but his charges ranged all the way from drug charges up to armed robbery when he robbed a newsagent at knife point. He was an addict of both drugs and alcohol, and he managed to convince Terry that he had changed. He didn't want that life anymore. He was done with that life and he wanted something nice and normal and happy with Terry. But that wasn't true. As soon as his feet were under the table, he started openly using drugs again, and he expected Terry, who worked full-time as a healthcare assistant, to fund his habit. He would drain Terry dry, and when she couldn't give him money, he would steal stuff from her house, such as her laptop, to go and sell so that he could get money for drugs. He would bleed her dry so much that for the first time she had to turn to her parents to ask them for help with money so that she could pay her bills and get by. On the 18th of September 2021, 11-year-old Lacey had her best friend 11-year-old Connie Gent over for a sleepover at her home at 54 Chandos Crescent. The 2 girls spent the entirety of that day doing a little fundraiser. They were trying to raise money for cancer research, and in order to do that, they set up a little sweet stall, which they were so proud about and were very dedicated to. This photo was snapped of them at the sweet stall, unbeknownst to anyone that would be the last photo of both of the girls alive.
Connie already had such a great night at her best friend's house the night before, and so she asked her parents, with the blessing of Terry, if she could stay one more night, to which they said yes, a decision that probably haunts them. Early the following morning, Damien would call the police, and when officers arrived at the house, this is what he told them.
Sonny, see you.
Right,
So,
we told you, I know what's going to happen to you now, mate.
well, I know it's going to
We
happen
just-
when you go to prison, obviously, but again,
Why, what have you done? Have you done something to anyone else?
yeah,
What have you done?
I've murdered 4 people.
When officers entered the home, they would discover the bodies of pregnant Terry, John Paul, Lacey and Connie, each of them being found in different rooms and all of them sustaining extensive head injuries. Damien had hunted each of them down, going from room to room, bearing a claw hammer and using that to bludgeon each of them to death, bringing the claw hammer down on their heads with all of his might, shattering their skulls. Horrifyingly, as 11-year-old Lacey was dying, he indecently assaulted her. For the horrific quadruple murder, Damien Bendel would be handed a whole life order, meaning that he will spend the rest of his natural life behind bars. If you're interested in hearing more and learning more about this case, I have just posted a full-length podcast episode on my podcast True Crime with Caitlin, which is available to listen to right now wherever you listen.
They peeled the skin off her skull and left her dumped in a field as if she was roadkill. Look, I don't care what anyone says, that is not human behavior. 16-year-old Christine Silliwan had just left Sunday church like she always did. Only this time, she went to go meet up with the boy, not knowing who was actually waiting for her. She'd been talking to this one guy online for a few weeks now. They messaged constantly on Facebook with flirty replies, little inside jokes that made her feel seen. I mean, she trusted him. At least that's what she thought. So when he asked if they wanted to meet up together after church, somewhere quiet, she said yes. But by the next morning, a man walking his dog stumbled upon something in an empty field just a few miles from her house. At first, he thought it was a mannequin, but as he got closer, it was not a mannequin, it was Christine. And I need to say this as gently as I can. What was done to her was not only unthinkable, it was calculated, deliberate, and deeply cruel. Her clothes were completely ripped off of her. Her body was brutalized and her face was gone. The skin had been peeled up above her skull like someone wanted to erase her. There was no sign of struggle, no weapon nearby. It was just her left out on this open field like nothing. She had chemical burns all over her body, all over her face, as if it was meant to destroy evidence or something even darker. At first, no one would understand why. Why would somebody do this to a 16-year-old girl? There was no forced entry at home, no signs of robbery, just a digital trail. So police went straight to her phone, straight to those Facebook messages. And that is when everything shifted. When she showed up that Sunday afternoon, they didn't just take her life randomly. They were trying to make a statement. And the autopsy was worse than what anybody could imagine. Christine had been choked with so much force that her trachea was crushed. Parts of her tongue and ears were cut off. There were signs of acid on her arms and neck. Acid. But that's not even the most horrifying part. They had peeled her facial skin so clean, investigators genuinely thought it was done surgically. Like whoever did this had to have studied anatomy or something. But then came a twist that nobody expected. Cops arrested a 17-year-old boy, and that boy was Christine's ex. We're gonna call him John because his identity is not known. Why? I don't know. Open up the files. They had been messaging on Facebook right before her death, but then one of the chats were deleted. And the account she had been messaging, that boy that she really liked, wasn't even real. It was a fake profile using someone else's name, someone else's photos, and whoever was behind it knew exactly how to gain her trust. And that person was her ex. That account was linked straight to John's IP address, and they believed that he made a fake profile to get her alone, and when she agreed to meet with him after church, that's when he attacked. But even with the arrest, something didn't sit right with the cops. The brutality of this crime, the precision. Could a teenager really do all of this alone? Even the police had doubts, and that's when they started thinking, okay, maybe he wasn't alone in this. A few weeks later, investigators arrested a man named Renato Genes, and what he told the cops sounded unreal, like it was a horror movie. He wasn't connected to Christine in any way. They weren't even the same age. They didn't go to the same school, nothing. But the cops still felt something very off about this man, so they listened. He told them things nobody outside of this case would know. Details like the types of wounds that she had, the timing, the locations, things only her would know. And then he confessed. He said, quote, "I was the one who did it. I tortured that girl because I saw a challenge and I wanted to try it. It wasn't random. I planned the whole thing." How do you say that out loud and sleep at night? He just said it without any hesitation, like it was nothing, as if Christine was his school project. But when it came time to stand trial, everything changed. This man pleaded not guilty. And before he could ever be questioned in court, before Christine's family could ever have some answers, he was found unalived in his jail cell. So now, again, we're left with no answers, no closure, nothing, just silence. And as for the ex, John, he was arrested and charged for his part of unaliving Christine. And even though people thought, oh, but he's only 17, he's so young, blah, blah, the court still said he is more than old enough to understand what he did. Although he didn't confess to anything, he was still sent to juvie instead of jail, which is better than being free. But even now, the case against him still is not finished. The worst part about these types of crimes is the silence that follows, when no one takes full responsibility, and now these families are forced to live with questions that will never get answered. And in Christine's case, that silence has never been broken. Thank you for listening to her story. Thank you for being here. I love all my girls and guys. Obviously, I gotta show love to my male audience, of course. I hope to see you in my next video. As always, mwah, hug.
Is there a serial killer that is more terrifying than John Wayne Gacy? He's the killer clown, a master manipulator, was able to successfully live a double life, all while being one of America's most prolific serial killers. At one point, they even thought that he had the most confirmed victims out of any other serial killer in American history. John Wayne Gacy was the only son in his family of 5. His childhood has been described as being fairly normal, and I guess that's true if you compare him to the childhoods of other serial killers, but his father was still very much an abusive, violent alcoholic who took his violence primarily out on his only son, John. Because of this, John's mother was really overprotective, but then his father would say that she was going to turn him into a mama's boy and a queer. John Wayne Gacy definitely questioned and struggled with his sexuality for most of his life, but honestly, he was just really interested in the idea of like sleeping with people. The idea fascinated him. When he was very young, his sister actually found a pair of their mother's undergarments that John had stolen. As John Wayne Gacy got older, he had a very normal life. He got married, he had 2 kids, he was running multiple businesses, he was really into politics, the Democratic Party. Everyone liked John Wayne Gacy. His own father actually apologized to him and told him that he had been wrong about him all along. By the late 1960s, John Wayne Gacy had created the perfect life, but it was all a lie. He was obsessed with teenage boys. He would only employ teenage boys. He would invite them over to his house, show them adult content, and give them alcohol. And then in 1968, when John was 26 years old, a 15-year-old boy reported to the police that John had essayed him. John was arrested. His family and community were shocked. John claimed that he was innocent and said that he was being framed by the Republican Party. And since the only evidence against him was this 15-year-old boy that was going to testify against him in the trial, John actually hired another teenage boy to go beat up that boy, scare him, and threaten him out of testifying. But that boy stood his ground. Good for him. He reported this attack and this threat to the police. John was charged with more crimes, and then he was sentenced to 10 years in prison. His wife promptly divorced him, took the kids, and John never saw any of them ever again. And oh my god, this is so infuriating, but despite being sentenced to an entire decade behind bars, John Wayne Gacy was released on parole only 18 months later. And within 6 months of being released, John was accused of essaying another teenage boy, but those charges were dropped because that boy never showed up to testify, and I can only imagine why. And about 2 years after that, John would take the life of his first victim. And now that he was out of jail, he moved, he got a new wife, he opened up a new business, and went right back to hiring a bunch of teenage boys. Now that he's created this brand new life, John Wayne Gacy went right back to being extremely well liked. And I cannot stress this enough, how convincing John Wayne Gacy was at creating this double life for himself. He was a successful businessman, a family man, a pillar of the community. He was everyone's friend. He would host the best parties. He would show up to every community event, all while being one of America's most prolific serial killers. John Wayne Gacy even spent his weekends volunteering his time as a volunteer clown. He was not being paid, but he would dress up as Pogo the Clown and do children's birthday parties, charity events, and also go to children's hospitals. And knowing what we know now, the fact that he was dressing up as a clown and doing all these children's birthday parties while killing a bunch of underage boys is extremely terrifying. But back then, before anyone knew any of this, it was just another reason why John Wayne Gacy was the nicest guy ever. In 1972, John Wayne Gacy took the life of his first victim, a 16-year-old boy named Timothy McCoy, that he picked up and brought back to his house house while his wife was out of town. Who knows what they did that night, but the next morning, John said that he woke up and this 16-year-old boy was standing in his room holding a sharp weapon that he had gotten from the kitchen. So he didn't know how to react. He just got up, attacked the boy, got the weapon from him, and then used the sharp weapon on the boy repeatedly until he passed away. It wasn't until after he killed the 16-year-old boy that John Wayne Gacy realized his mistake. In the kitchen, breakfast had been prepared by Timothy. He set the table for two. Timothy was not trying to hurt John Wayne Gacy. He was trying to wake him up so they could have breakfast together. He just so happened to be holding this kitchen utensil when he did it. John Wayne Gacy buried Timothy's body in the crawlspace of the home that he shared with his wife, and then after this, teenage boys and young men were disappearing one after the other. And some of these boys were actually employees of John. John was questioned multiple times. They never did a background check on him, and he was always able to talk himself out of any suspicion. In 1976, he divorced his second wife, and with her out of the picture and out of the house, he went on a killing spree. He was burying all his victims in the crawlspace of his home, under the floor of his house, or in the backyard. And when he felt like he was running out of space, he started disposing their bodies in a nearby river. And since it was the 70s and a lot of these boys didn't come from the best homes or didn't really have a lot of family, when they were being reported missing, the police were just disregarding them as runaways and did not investigate. Until December of 1976, when 15-year-old Robert Peace disappeared after he told his mother that he was going to go meet up with John Wayne Gacy to discuss a potential job. 15-year-old Robert was on the honor roll. He was a good kid. He wasn't the type to go and run away. So his disappearance was going to be properly investigated. There were a lot of witnesses that saw that John Wayne Gacy was the last person with Robert before he disappeared. So the police decided to finally do a background check on John Wayne Gacy and saw that he had been previously convicted of assailing a teenage boy. With this information, they got a search warrant for his home. When they searched his home, they did not find Robert, but they found handcuffs, duct tape, rope, an 18-inch adult toy, and a bunch of driver's license that belonged to teenage boys that had been reported missing. John Wayne Gacy was put on 24/7 surveillance. There were officers whose entire job was just to follow his every single move, but John felt really confident. He was really friendly with the surveillance officers, so one day when one of the surveillance officers asked if they could use John's bathroom, he said it'd be fine. The second that officer said that he got in John's bathroom that was connected to the crawl space, he said that it reeked of death. He knew there had to be at least one body in this house. That officer told John that he was going to be coming back with a second search warrant, and I think John realized that the jig was up. He went to his lawyers and he confessed to them that he tortured, essayed, and killed over 30 young men. And John Wayne Gacy was arrested at the age of 36. He made a full confession and even helped the investigators find all of his victims. After digging up the entire home and property of John Wayne Gacy, 29 bodies were found on the property and another 4 were found in the rivers outside of Chicago. Not all of his victims had been identified, but the ones that had been identified are so young. All of them are between the ages of 14 years old and 21 years old. And what will really make you mad, because I know it pisses me off, is that all of his victims that we know of were killed within that 10-year span that John Wayne Gacy was supposed to be behind bars for his first offense when he essayed that boy back in 1968. If they had never released him early on parole after only 18 months, all 33 of these men's lives would not have been stolen in such a brutal, senseless way. John Wayne Gacy pled not guilty by reason of insanity, but he was found guilty on all 33 charges of murder and sentenced to the death penalty. He tried to appeal this multiple times, but it did not work. While he awaited his execution, he became a painter and started painting clowns. The day before he was executed, he saw his sister and they took this photo. And then in May of 1994, John Wayne Gacy was executed while a crowd of people cheered in the streets outside. 4 of John Wayne Gacy's victims have yet to be identified, but they have been identifying his victims as recently as 2021. So there is still hope that these men will have their names back one day. If you watched the end of this video, thank you so much. Let me know all your thoughts in the comments and let me know what case you want to see me cover next. I cannot believe that October is almost over. I will see you guys tomorrow with another video, a Halloween video. Until then, I love you guys so much.
A 20-year-old pilot and his plane disappeared over Australia's Bass Strait, but right before he did, he radioed into air traffic control. And what he said is one of the most disturbing things I have ever heard. Right before he vanished, Frederick Valentik called into air traffic control to report an unidentified aircraft hovering about 1,000 feet above him. Air traffic control told him that there was no known traffic at that level, but Frederick insisted that there was. And whatever it was illuminated by large bright green lights and had a shiny metal surface. His final words were, quote, "It's not an aircraft," end quote, before all contact was lost. His final words are incredibly disturbing to me, but what really scares me is the unidentified noise that followed. Officials say that it went on for some time, and they could only describe it as a metallic scraping sound. This is the truly disturbing disappearance of Frederick Valentik, and it's one of those cases that will leave you wondering what really happened. So let's talk about it. This is Frederick, and he was only 20 years old when he mysteriously disappeared in 1978. He was a relatively inexperienced Australian pilot with about 150 hours of flying time. At the time of his disappearance, Frederick held a Class 4 instrument rating, which basically means that he was able to solo fly at night, but only under good weather and visual conditions. He struggled academically, which unfortunately continued into his pilot career. He was a member of the Australian Air Force Cadets, and he was so determined to make a career in aviation that he started studying part-time to become a commercial pilot. But like I said, academics was not really his strong suit. On 2 separate occasions, he failed all 5 commercial license examination subjects. And even just 1 month before he disappeared, he failed 3 more tests in relation to getting his commercial pilot's license. So needless to say, he was struggling. But like I said, he was able to fly solo. And that part seemed routine for him. I don't know if this has to do with him just being young or not doing well on aviation tests, but on more than one occasion, he was involved in flying incidents. For example, one time he flew into a controlled zone in Sydney, and for that he received a warning. But then 2 other times, he deliberately flew into a cloud, which I guess isn't allowed and is very bad to do. For these 2 offenses, officials were actually considering prosecuting him, but they never got the chance to. This brings us to October 21st, 1978. It was just a little after 6 p.m. when Frederick fueled up his Cessna 182 light aircraft. He took off from the Moorabbin Airport in Melbourne for what should have been a routine flight across the Bass Strait to King Island. He submitted his flight plan, which would take him across the Bass Strait, over Cape Otway, and like I said, eventually to his final destination, King Island. This trip should have been around 140 miles, and the flight plan estimated that it would take about 41 minutes to Cape Otway, and then another 28 to King Island at an altitude of around 5,000 feet. Frederick told flight officials that he was picking up 4 of his friends, and he even brought with him 4 extra life jackets. But he also told other officials that he was just taking a trip to catch crayfish. What the real reasoning was for this trip, no one knows. As he took off, he established 2-way radio communications with Melbourne Flight Service Unit, otherwise known as FSU, and initially things were going good. He was a bit nervous because the Bass Strait is notorious for being a super challenging and sometimes dangerous body of water, which separates mainland Australia from Tasmania. But on this specific evening, the weather was super good, and there were no real concerns. But at around 7:06 p.m., Frederick radios in to FSU, and what he says is incredibly disturbing. According to Frederick, an unidentified aircraft was following him at 4,500 feet, to which FSU responds that there was no known traffic at that level other than him. But Frederick insists that there was something, that he could see a large unknown aircraft which appeared to be illuminated by 4 bright landing lights. He told FSU that he was unable to confirm its type, but he said that it passed about 1,000 feet overhead and was moving at incredibly high speed. After they go back and forth on the radio, Frederick says that the aircraft was now approaching him from the east. Now, keep in mind, as he's describing all of this, FSU still can't see anything on their radar. To them, it looks like Frederick is all alone up there. A little while into this conversation, Frederick says that he's beginning to have engine problems, and when asked to describe or identify this unknown aircraft, Frederick said, quote, "It's not an aircraft," end quote. His transmission was then interrupted by an unidentified noise that officials describe as metallic scraping sounds. After this, all contact was lost and Frederick vanished. Neither he nor his plane made it to his final destination, King Island. Needless to say, a massive search was conducted pretty much right away and involved multiple aircrafts by sea and air. It was pretty intense and encompassed over 1,000 square miles, but absolutely no trace of Frederick or his plane was found. The search officially ended just 4 days later, and everyone was left so confused about what really happened to him. His disappearance was investigated by the Australian Department of Transport, or DOT, and they were unable to determine the cause. They didn't know if there was some sort of mechanical issue with the plane, but all they could say was that this event was presumed fatal for Frederick. This case, though, gained national and international attention, mainly because of Frederick's last call, and the fact that at this point in time, this was the biggest aviation mystery since Amelia Earhart. Theories started circulating, and one in particular really stuck. The biggest theory, especially by locals, was that Frederick was abducted by aliens, and that the unknown aircraft above him was really a UFO. What didn't help this theory was that shortly before and after his disappearance on that same night, so many residents of Australia reported seeing a UFO. I guess several residents reported seeing an erratically moving green light in the sky, which also kind of aligned with what Frederick said he saw right above him. So this is obviously very concerning and creepy. But something that could offer an explanation is that according to the Mount Stromlo Observatory in Australia, on the night of Frederick's disappearance, there was a meteorite stream. It was incredibly active with about 10 to 15 sites per hour. So this could very well be what residents and even Frederick saw that night. Trying to play devil's advocate, because I personally do believe in aliens or at least some other life form out there. And I do think it's weird that he described this aircraft as shiny and metallic with big green lights. But I also fully agree that what the locals saw that night was realistically the meteorite stream. But the deeper into this investigation authorities went, the stranger it got. Because according to Frederick's dad, Frederick was reportedly a strong believer in aliens and UFOs, and he was pretty worried about being attacked by them. And then enters Frederick's girlfriend, Rhonda. Now, according to Rhonda, just 6 days before he disappeared, Frederick talked about the possibility of a UFO taking him away. Pretty strange, right? Well, it gets weirder. According to Brian Dunning, who is an American science writer and documentary filmmaker, he said that Frederick's last radio conversation is eerily similar to the dialogue from a scene in the film Close Encounters of the Third Kind. This movie was released less than a year prior to Frederick's disappearance, and it was extremely popular amongst pilots and UFO fans, so aka Frederick. Just wanted to throw this in there because it seems important that the dialogues were that similar. About 5 years after Frederick went missing, a bombshell turned this case potentially upside down. In July of 1983, an engine cowl flap was found washed ashore on Flinders Island. This is about 219 miles east in the opposite direction of where Frederick was supposed to be going that night. With this discovery, the Bureau of Air Safety Investigation worked closely with the Royal Australian Navy Research Lab to see if it would even be possible for this part of the plane to have surfaced in this exact location, based on where Frederick was when he disappeared. And according to them, it was possible that it ended up in this location just based on the ocean currents and subsurface drift in the Bass Strait. Furthermore, after extensive research, this engine cowl flap was identified as having come from a Cessna 182 aircraft, just like Frederick's, and it was between a certain range of serial numbers, which included Frederick's. This seems like a great lead. However, it couldn't be conclusively matched to Frederick's specific plane, and it was later noted that another 2 Cessnas in the area had lost similar parts around that same period of time. So back to square one. It could belong to Frederick's plane, but it also might not. So officially, per the Australian government, Frederick's disappearance remains unsolved. But over the years, there have been a few theories as to what really happened. Theory number 1 is pretty logical, and it's that he experienced some sort of mechanical issue like he alluded to in his last call, and then he crashed into the sea. Theory number 2, which is believed by a handful of aviation experts, is that Frederick possibly became disoriented while flying over water at dusk. This is a condition known as spatial disorientation, and in some cases, pilots can misinterpret visual clues. This leads them to believe that they are seeing something that isn't there. Maybe he saw his own lights in the reflection of the water, and since he was inexperienced, maybe he was deceived by the illusion of a tilted horizon and was actually flying upside down. It's possible that he tried to compensate and inadvertently put his aircraft into a downward spiral, commonly known as a graveyard spiral. I guess guess the g-forces of a tightening spiral would decrease fuel flow, resulting in the rough idling that Frederick reported. Then, as a result, he crashed into the sea. Theory number 3 is that he staged his own disappearance. One of the biggest reasons that people feel like this could be true is because on his route to King Island, he would have had to pass Cape Otway, but at no time was his aircraft ever plotted on radar. This is really weird because he should have been there by the time he called FSU, yet he wasn't seen on radar at that location. And the weather was super clear, so he should have been spotted. This has cast major doubt if he was ever near Cape Otway to begin with. And what's super interesting is that right around the same time that he disappeared, Melbourne police received reports of a light aircraft making a mysterious landing a little ways down from Cape Otway. So it's led many people to believe if that was actually Frederick. Another odd thing is that, as we all know, his destination was supposed to be King Island that night, yet he failed to inform that airport of his intention to land there. This goes completely against protocol, and on top of that, he never requested that the runway lights be turned on, even though he was flying at night and would have needed them. So with all of this information, a lot of people question if he was ever planning to land on King Island at all, or if he staged his disappearance and this was all just a big hoax. Theory number 4 is that he ended his own life, but after multiple interviews with the doctors and all of his colleagues that knew him, experts have essentially eliminated this possibility. How? I'm not entirely sure, because sometimes you just sadly never know. Also, I just want to point out that if there's ever a break in this case and it ends up being confirmed that the engine cowl flap that was found belonged to Frederick, the theories of this being a staged disappearance or him being abducted by aliens would be proved wrong. This leads me to my very last theory, that Frederick was abducted by aliens. So along with all of the odd information that I mentioned earlier, Brian Dunning, who is the American science writer, he believes that it's entirely possible that Frederick knew the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind and wanted to recreate it. Since it was a super popular movie and the dialogues were pretty similar, he thinks that Frederick went out and tried to recreate that specific scene for fun. That he deliberately tried making his aircraft fly in a circular pattern to give the radar guys something to see. And then he became disoriented and accidentally crashed into the water. This is definitely a legit possibility, with him having been obsessed with aliens and UFOs prior to his disappearance. I don't know, guys. What do you think? I want to believe that the simplest answer is probably the correct one, but I just don't know. His last conversation is absolutely terrifying to me because either way, that was the very last time that he was alive. Something happened to him out there. We just don't know exactly what. But it's now been 48 years, and whatever really happened to Frederick that night in the sky remains a mystery.
It's just already such a difficult situation without the what ifs, and then you add that on top of it and it's like unimaginable. 22-year-old Logan Federico was from North Carolina. She was a big sister, a daughter, a friend, and she lost her life in the most tragic way. And the man responsible had previously been arrested 39 times with a criminal record dating all the way back to 2013. Logan was an aspiring teacher who loved kids and looked forward to having her own kids one day and creating a family. She was also a really big Swiftie, very much so a people person, and just overall the kind of person that sets out to make a positive impact in the world. Logan was a student at a community college, but she would often go visit her friends that were at different schools in both North and South Carolina. And that's what she was doing on May 3rd of 2025. She had taken the weekend off work to go and see her friends in Columbia in South Carolina, but Logan would never return back home. She was at her friend's house sleeping peacefully after they had gone back from a night out when 30-year-old Alexander Dickey broke into the house in the middle of the night to conduct a robbery. Prior to entering the house that Logan was in, Alexander had stolen keys to a car, robbed a different house where he stole a weapon, eventually finding himself breaking into the house that Logan was sleeping in next door around 3 a.m. He stole wallets, credit cards, and in the most senseless, malicious act with a weapon that he had stolen, he ended Logan's life, an innocent girl's life. Before he left, Logan's friends found her body the next morning and authorities were called at 11:15 a.m. After leaving the house the night of, Alexander used the credit cards that he had stolen to go on a shopping spree at several different stores, driving a stolen car and using the money that he had stolen from his robberies. He was found the next day on Sunday. Residents from the area spotted him running from the woods, stealing another car, wrecking that car, and then walking back into a house that he had broken into. When law enforcement went to arrest him, he set that house up in flames as his last effort to avoid being arrested. Thankfully, they got him. He was removed from the house through a window and he was put in the back of a police car and taken into custody. Alexander's record of 39 prior arrests included 25 felonies. He had charges for robberies, burglary, resisting arrest, amongst other things. But here's the thing, much of Alexander's records never showed up up properly in the state system. Allegedly, there were gaps in reporting his crimes, meaning that some of his prior arrests and convictions were not counted for when he went before the court. So when someone is arrested, their fingerprints and case details are supposed to be sent to the state law enforcement division, which is supposed to keep a written record of the criminal. In Alexander's case, some of those reports were never properly submitted. That meant that when judges or prosecutors looked at his background when it came time to sentence him from a crime, they only saw part of his history, not the full list. Those missing records likely allowed him to avoid harsher sentences and stay out of prison when there is a big chance that he would have been sentenced for way longer, years longer than he was if those fingerprints for his prior crimes had been recorded. And that is what has been one of the hardest things for Logan's family to accept, because that was a failure that Logan's family believes cost her life. Alexander Dickey is currently being held at the Lexington County Detention Center. He has been charged with Logan's death, as well as with 10 additional charges, including 2 counts of first-degree burglary. If convicted, he could be facing life without parole. Since the tragedy, Logan's dad, Steve, has been fighting for different laws to make sure that something like this does not happen to anybody else. He has talked publicly about Logan, explaining how it has broken their family, how they will never be the same, but emphasizing that he will continue to keep fighting for Logan until they get the justice that they deserve. This is a quote from him, quote, "We train our kids to live without us at some point, but nobody trained me for this. She was my life. I think I got cheated. I won't be able to walk her down the aisle," end quote. And in regards to his children, he has said, quote, "I always sent them a text that said, 'Good night, I love you, and I'm going to bed.' I always sent them kissy and heart emojis, and they always responded. I am still waiting for her response. It's not coming now," end quote. Logan will be forever missed, forever loved. She is forever 22 years old. And it breaks my heart, honestly, to look at her father's eyes when he's talking about her. You can just see the pain through his eyes. It's like the most painful mix of so much pain, but also so much love in his eyes. I'm gonna keep an eye on this case. Let me know if you guys have heard of this and let me know what your thoughts are on it. But that is all I have for today. Thank you guys for spending some time with me today. I hope you guys are having the best day. If not, go do something to make it the best day. Make somebody happy. Remind the people that you love them, that you love them. And I will see you in my next video. Massive kiss on the forehead to every single one of you.
This one really keeps me up at night just because of how strange and unusual the circumstances are. Like, we know you're hiding something. It was autumn 2015 in Munn Hall in Pennsylvania. Cody Joyce was nicknamed Gino by friends and family. He was a really cool, chill guy from the area. He was raised well, had a lovely family, did well at school, did well at sports. Like, he had everything that any guy could dream of. He also really wanted to become a rapper, and he was doing quite well actually in his rap career. He was only 23 and he was doing all of the things that normal 23-year-old guys do. Going out, hanging with friends, and going to like functions like house parties, gatherings, that kind of thing. On the 27th of September, he headed over to this house party with a bunch of other people. And at some point during the night, a fight broke out at that house party. It was originally between him and this other guy called Connor Stevens, and the crazy thing was this fight was over a Hot Pocket, which I think are like Greg's steak bakes that you can do at home. I don't know, let me know, people of America, like, are they really worth fighting about? Apparently this fight really escalated. It was originally just between these two guys, and then loads of other people got involved. So there was Connor, Ryan Sabo, Derek Marcone, and Devin Hinkle. And it wasn't really a fair fight because apparently it was all of these guys versus Cody. At some point a little later, the police were called to the address. Police got there and found Cody lying face down on the floor, and honestly they kind of just thought, oh right, well he's obviously OD'd. So they immediately injected him with Narcan, which if you don't know is what you're supposed to use if somebody has OD'd, and usually as soon as you inject them with it, like, springs them back to life pretty quickly. But when they injected Cody, nothing happened. They took him to hospital, but tragically he was pronounced dead. It was months before the autopsy came back, and the results really changed everything. Every single substance that was listed was negative. He had 0 drugs in his system. And because months and months had gone by this point, nobody from the party was questioned, no evidence had been collected, because they thought this was just an accident. The police had kind of just wiped their hands of this without even properly investigating. The medical examiner confirmed this was no accident. Cody died from homicidal violence. Now, what does that even mean? They said the cause was asphyxiation due to compression of the neck, brought on by a physical altercation with multiple people. The general feeling is that Cody was presumably being restrained while other people were punching him. There was this eerie silence from everybody at the party. One anonymous witness did come forward to say that he was drunk and lying down in another room, and then he heard a commotion. He went out and he saw 4 guys fighting with Cody, and one was strangling him. There was also kind of rumors going around that potentially Cody may have accidentally punched a girl who tried to intervene in the fight, and that only fueled the fire even more. For some strange reason, police really didn't seem that interested in investigating this homicide. They didn't really press people at the party about what happened, and everybody stayed weirdly quiet. Cody's girlfriend even spoke out about a potentially crucial piece of evidence that police were kind of just ignoring. So Cody's uncle had apparently got this text from Ryan Sabo's ex-girlfriend. She allegedly said that Ryan had sent a text to the effect of, "It was me and Devin Hinkle that murdered Cody." And I've seen the text message. It was on a documentary about this case. It said, "I might be going to jail tonight. Me and Devin's nickname might have literally killed Gino Joyce. I don't know what condition he is, and I don't know how you feel about me, but if I go down, I love you no matter how you feel." While to be kind of admitting to a potential murder, but also seeming more interested in how this girl feels about you. But despite this text, police still have not made any arrests in this case. This text literally feels like a confession to me, right? But police are like, we don't have enough evidence to convict anyone. Let me know what you guys think about this case, and for more cases like this, I post a brand new episode on my podcast, The Born Investigation, every single week.
In June of 2021, she spoke out about this entire thing for the first time, saying, quote, "I think they've done a good job at exploiting my life in the way that they've done my life, so I feel like it should be an open court hearing and they should hear what I have to say. I'm telling you this again 2 years later after I've lied and told the whole world that I'm okay and that I'm happy. It's a lie. I'm not happy. I can't sleep. I'm so angry. It's insane. And I'm depressed. I cry every day, and the reason I'm telling you this is because I don't think how the state of California can have all of this written in the court documents from the time that I showed up and do absolutely nothing. It's embarrassing and demoralizing what I've been through, and that's the main reason I've never said it openly. I honestly didn't think anyone would believe me," end quote. I've been wanting to talk about this for a while, so let's just get straight into it. Britney Spears, she was born in 1981. She was born in Mississippi, but she was raised in Louisiana. She's the middle child. She has an older brother named Brian and a little sister named Jamie, and if you didn't know, Jamie is one of the main cast members in Zoe 101. I'm sure you know. Britney was religious as a child, and later on in her adult life, she considered herself to be Catholic, but then in 2022, after everything regarding her father and the entire situation came out, she said, quote, "I don't believe in God anymore because of the way my children and my family have treated me. There is nothing to believe in anymore," end quote. Ever since she was a little girl, Britney had so much passion and drive within her. I think as young as 4 years old, she began taking dance lessons. She also loved to sing and participate in talent shows. She also liked gymnastics and basketball. She was a very creative, passionate little girl, and she felt like she knew what she was supposed to do with her life from a very young age. When she was 8 years old, she auditioned to be in the Mickey Mouse Club, but that did not end up working out because the director thought that she was way too young, but that definitely did help open up some doors for her. Fast forward to December of 1992, and Britney made it to the all-new Mickey Mouse Club. At this point in her life, at a very, very young age, Britney had already scored different professional jobs in acting, doing what she loved, doing what she was good at, but her being so young, when people started to know her name, also came with its downfalls, which that sucks. Sucks so bad when something so good and so exciting can get to feel negative because of the public criticism and unrealistic expectations the world has. In 1997, Britney's mom, Lynn, talked to a family friend who also happened to be an entertainment lawyer and asked for his opinion regarding Britney's career. With his advice, Britney recorded a demo to send to that family friend so that he could then send it to record labels to pitch her to sign with them. She ended up meeting with 4 record labels. She was denied by 3, but there was one that saw the potential that she had. And in 1998, at only 15 years old, Britney signed a deal with a record company. That was huge for her. She was so excited that all of her dreams were coming true, but that was overshadowed when she also realized that the media's attention on her was also growing. And they seemed to be focused on all of the wrong things. They weren't so much asking her about herself, about her wins, her successes, but more so asking about her looks and her outfits and her body. It was weird, and we all know how gross media can be. In January of 1999, just the following year after signing with a record label, her debut album, Baby One More Time, was released. And Britney had always backed herself. She had always believed in herself, but not in a million years could she have predicted just how successful this album got to be. The album topped the charts in 15 different countries. It ended up selling over 10 million copies within the first year. It then sold over 30 million copies worldwide, making it one of the best-selling albums in history. And the most successful debut album ever released by any artist. Wait, am I saying that word wrong? Debut? No way that's how you say it, but you don't, I don't know, whatever, her first album. It also became the biggest selling album ever by any teenage artist. She earned 2 Grammy Award nominations for New Artist in Female Pop Vocal Performance, and the following year in 2000 came Oops, I Did It Again. That album debuted at #1 in the US. It also sold over 1 million units within the first week. It broke the record for the highest debut sales by any solo artist, and it also earned her 2 more Grammy nominations. Like, Britney Spears could not be more iconic if she tried. In 2001, she was part of the Super Bowl halftime show. She went on tour. She released her 3rd album. She was on magazine covers, doing commercials, going on talk shows. She appeared in a movie. She performed at the 2001 VMAs. She was unstoppable. And most of all of that success came before she was even 20 years old. In her book, Britney has said that when she looks back at that period of her life, she was truly living out her dreams. It was also during this time that she was in a relationship with Justin Timberlake. They started dating in 1999 when she was 17 and he was 18 years old. They dated until 2002 when Justin broke up with her, and what she says was a 2-word text message. And this is a quote from her, quote, "As much as Justin hurt me, there was a huge foundation of love. And when he left me, I was devastated. When I say devastated, I mean I could barely speak for months. Whenever anyone asked me about him, all I could do was cry. I don't know if I was clinically in shock, but it felt that way," end quote. And then in 2003, when she was 22 years old, Britney got married. Only for 55 hours to her childhood friend, Jason Alexander. They were in Vegas, they were having fun, they were partying, and it was the first time that Britney felt like she had a break from work, so she was ready to have fun. But then the party landed her and Jason in a wedding chapel at 5:30 in the morning when they got married. The very next day, they got the marriage annulled. And then in 2004, Britney started dating Kevin Federline when she was 22 and he was 26 years old. She knew him because he was a backup dancer. Oh, and also in 2004, this same year, by the way, was when she won her first Grammy, which was awesome. The relationship between her and Kevin, even though it had its rocky moments, it really was something special for Britney, because for the first time since Justin, she felt like she had someone who actually truly cared about her and her well-being. She was so head over heels for him that she actually proposed to him. He said no, but then immediately after proposed to her, and they got married in a surprise ceremony. The following year in 2005, the couple had their first child, a baby boy, and almost exactly a year later, they had their second. And her career, by the way, was still very much doing extremely well. She was still the person that everyone was talking about. So all of these different stages and experiences that she was going through are constantly being reported on in the media. And of course, that came with loads of unwanted judgment. Judgment for every single little thing that she did. I mean, she always had eyes on her. Add to that all of the hormones from pregnancy and postpartum, the paparazzi surrounding her every single second of every single day, now even trying to take pictures of her babies as well, and judging every single decision that she was making as a young mom. Her husband was also constantly away for work, and it was a lot, and it weighed very heavy on Britney. Looking back on it years later, she had said that she felt that during that time she was a little depressed, trying to balance every aspect of her life at the time. She has said, quote, "I now know that I was displaying just about every symptom of prenatal depression, sadness, anxiety, fatigue. Once the babies were born, I added on my confusion and obsession about the baby's safety, which was ratcheting up to the more media attention was on us. Being a new mom is challenging enough without trying to do everything under a microscope," end quote. After 2 years of marriage, Britney filed for divorce, which takes a lot to call it quits on something that matters to you when you know that it's not the right thing for you. She knew the marriage wasn't right for her. She knew that staying in the marriage ultimately would not be what was best for her, and she didn't want to be in it any longer, because why would she have to? So she filed for divorce, but naturally, adding that on top of everything else she already had going on, it was too much, and she found herself to be in a very fragile space. Her mind just could not carry the weight of everything anymore, and very sadly, she slowly started to lose herself, and that showed in her actions. The divorce was finalized in 2007, and Kevin got sole custody of the children, and even though conversations regarding the concern of Britney's mental health had already begun, the concern was at its highest in 2008. She wasn't able to see her kids. She looked off on live performances. She shaved her head. She started losing her patience with paparazzi. Her mental health was at its lowest. Everything that made her her, it felt like it was slipping away. She has said, quote, "Flailing those weeks without my children, I lost it over and over again. I didn't even really know how to take care of myself. Because of the divorce, I'd had to move out of the home that I loved, and I was living in a random English-styled cottage in Beverly Hills. The paparazzi was circling extra excitedly now like sharks. But if I couldn't see my sons, I didn't want to see anybody." And
Regarding the umbrella incident that you all probably know about, she said, quote, "I screamed. They liked that. When I reacted, one guy wouldn't go away until he got what he wanted. He kept smirking, kept asking me the same terrible questions over and over, trying to get me to react again. Finally, I snapped. I grabbed the only thing within reach, a green umbrella, and I jumped out of the car. I wasn't going to hit him because even at my worst, I'm not that kind of person. I hit the next closest thing, which was his car. Pathetic, really. It was a desperate move by a desperate person," end quote. And that brings us to 2008. In January, after a custody fight with Kevin, Brittany was taken to a hospital in LA for a psychiatric evaluation because there were serious concerns regarding her mental health. She was released and taken again later that same month, and then in February of 2008, she was put under a court-ordered conservatorship. This is a hard word for me to say, and I have to say it so much, so just bear with me. I know I'm pronouncing it weird, okay? She was put under a court-ordered conservatorship, and that gave her father, James, significant power over every single little thing in her life, including all of her finances. And if you're confused on what that means, it's when a judge gives someone else legal control over another person's life and decisions, usually because the person is considered unable to take care of themselves. But it's something that is supposed to be beneficial and it's supposed to be helpful. It's designed to help protect a person who is not able to protect themselves at that time. But what Brittany's dad did and how he handled the entire situation could not be further off from what he was supposed to do. I could honestly make an entire video about the conservatorship itself, but let's just talk through some of the things. First of all, this court order was in California, right? To get a conservatorship signed off by a judge, you have to prove that the person is incapable. And in California, that means unable to feed yourself, unable to dress yourself, unable to clothe yourself, and to shelter yourself. But then, in Brittany's case, immediately after that was put in place, she started working, traveling every single week, performing, doing meet and greets, TV appearances, which the court has to sign off on as well. So the judge must have thought that she was capable of doing all of that, yet found her incapable of being able to take care of herself. But being in this conservatorship with her father meant that he had control over every single decision in her life, but it wasn't just him. It was very much also TriStar, her business management, and the people that worked for them. Brittany's dad had security on her, and I really mean on her, like standing right by her side every second of the day. And when new people would be hired on to work for Brittany to protect Brittany, they would be told about the conservatorship, but the number one rule of it was that you did not ask about it. And people on her team that were out of the loop were just told that everything that they had to do was in Brittany's best interest because Brittany either asked for it or she wanted it. But the client was not Brittany. The client was James. Everyone reported to James. One of the security guards that worked for her later said that it felt like Brittany was in prison and like they were supposed to be her prison guards. Everything was monitored, every single friendship, every single relationship, every single conversation, to the point that her father asked a security guard how to put parental control settings on Brittany's iPhone, and he even considered just giving her an iPad instead of a phone. But he read every single text message she ever sent, saw every single phone call, every FaceTime, everything, and then he would take away her phone only to have further control of her. Her dad also placed a recording device inside of Brittany's bedroom to know what she was doing and talking about and saying at all times. When it came to her friends as well, her father Jamie, members of TriStars, and others would make sure that Brittany was not getting too close to anyone because they wanted to keep her isolated to be able to keep her in their control. Her manager told a friend of Brittany's once, quote, "Be careful, don't get too close, people have a way of disappearing," end quote. And even more disturbing, when it came to the men in Brittany's life, men were not allowed to talk to her unless Jamie, her father, had approved it. He would make them sign contracts, sign NDAs. And if and when they were allowed to talk to Brittany, Jamie would then have them followed by private investigators to make sure that their behaviors were, quote, acceptable to her father, end quote. Brittany was making so much money throughout these years of her life, but did she have a say in what happened to it? Not at all. What just happened to the lights? She would not be able to order dinner if it was not approved. One time she was told that she couldn't order sushi because it wasn't in the budget, although she probably could afford to buy the entire sushi restaurant. One time she was told she wasn't allowed to buy a pair of Skechers because they were not in the budget. She could not do anything, and yet all of the money that she was making was divided between her father, her business managers, and accountants. Not only her lawyers, but also every other lawyer involved in the conservatorship in any way, all of management, teams, production teams, etc., etc. Some reports suggest that her father and his legal/financial team may have collectively made tens of millions from Britney's earnings throughout this time. So did her father sign her up for certain things because he thought it was what Britney wanted? No, he made every decision that he did because it meant more money for him. And if she pushed back, he would push back harder because he could. By 2016, Britney felt like she had completely lost herself and felt that her father was obsessed with her to a concerning degree. She told the courts that she was scared of her father and that being in this conservatorship for her meant, quote, living in fear. In January of 2019, she was checked into a mental health facility, and there are proof in text messages sent by Britney saying that she was there against her will, yet that didn't seem to matter. And then in late 2020, Britney finally spoke up. In a court filing that November, she said that she was afraid of her father, and she made it clear that she was not going to perform again until he no longer controlled her career. Her court-appointed lawyer at the time even confirmed that her professional break was because of her father, Jamie Spears. Shortly after, her father claimed that he found over-the-counter energy supplements, said that he found them in her purse and used that as the reason to send her to a facility in Beverly Hills that cost $60,000 a month. Britney writes in her book about how when she told her father that she didn't want to go, her father threatened her and told her that if she didn't go, she would end up in court and be humiliated. So she went, and she was forced to be in constant therapy sessions, isolated for 2 months, and then placed with other patients for another month. She said, quote, "This makes me so sad." Quote, "3 months into my confinement, I started to believe that my little heart, whatever made me Britney, was no longer inside of my body anymore." End quote. That makes me so upset. The end of the conservatorship did not come until 2021, and the process to get there was a very long one and one that was highly publicized. It was tough, but on November 12th of 2021, the judge formally ended the conservatorship, giving Britney full control over her life and her finances for the first time in 13 years. Following that, she took a well-deserved break from everything and posted on Instagram saying that she very much needed it. In 2022, she got married to her boyfriend Sam of 5 years, but then they divorced in 2024. And when speaking out about that on social media, she wrote, quote, "I've been playing it strong for way too long, and my Instagram may seem perfect, but it's far from reality, and I think we all know that. I would love to show my emotions and tears on how I really feel, but some reason I've always had to hide my weaknesses," end quote. In 2023, she released her book, A Woman in Me, which you all should read. But today, we don't really know much about what's going on with her today. Her social media profiles are active, and everything online says that she's living a quiet life in California, and I hope that she is, and I hope that she's at peace and she's safe. But a lot of people today are having a hard time believing that she is doing fine. And look, if you want my personal opinion, I am not the kind of person who thinks that a celebrity owes us anything just because they are a celebrity. I think if someone wants to be out of the spotlight, no matter how long they've been in it, should be able to do so because it's their life, it's their choices. They are their own human being and they should be able to do whatever they want to do. So I hope that she's okay, but I would be lying if I said that I didn't worry about her. Again, I don't think that she owes anyone anything at all, but I just hope that she's okay, and I hope that she is surrounded by people who love her. And I want to know what you guys think. Anyway, that is all I have for today. Sorry about me not being able to pronounce the word that I had to say literally 100 times throughout this video. And also sorry about the lighting. It was weird. Thank you for spending time with me today. I hope you guys are having the best day. If not, go do something to make it the best day. Make somebody happy, and I will see you in my next video. Massive kiss on the forehead to every single one of you.
This is the story of DeAndre Flanagan. 26-year-old DeAndre Flanagan and Kirsten Watson were dating for a few years until the relationship went sour. DeAndre became verbally abusive, jealous, very controlling. The only good thing she got out of the relationship was their 2-year-old daughter, Zavea. By February of 2023, Kirsten had had enough and decided to end the relationship, but DeAndre wasn't letting her go so easily. Not even a month into their breakup, on March 15th, she had to contact the Houston police because DeAndre was making terroristic threats against her and her daughter. She contacted them again just 4 days later because he kept calling her phone and harassing her. She even showed the officers the text messages that DeAndre sent saying how he was going to harm their 2-year-old daughter, Zavea. But both times, police didn't take the matter seriously. Kirsten later said that the police thought that she made it up because DeAndre was Zavea's biological father, which is crazy. But if the police had did a little digging on DeAndre, they would have seen that he had a little record dating back to 2017, where he was charged with evading arrest, and again in 2018, where he was charged with assault causing bodily harm to a family member. That family member was his special needs brother. He ended up doing 30 days in jail for that. But that same year, he faced criminal mischief charges because he drove his car into someone else's house. He was still on probation in March of 2023 for that incident. Now he's stalking Kirsten's life. On Monday, March 20th at around 10 a.m., DeAndre went to go pick up Zavea from daycare, but he didn't take the little girl home. The two went to Walmart, where Kirsten was working at the time. He walked into the store and demanded that she hand over her phone and the passcode. He was using their daughter for leverage. He was basically telling her, if you don't give me the passcode to your phone, I'm going to hurt our daughter. Kirsten then tried to pry their daughter from his arms, but this didn't do nothing but make him more angry. He'd hit her in the face multiple times, snatched the phone out of her hand, and left the store. She immediately ran to get help so she can call the police. The police started tracking her phone. When they finally caught up with DeAndre, for the next 45 minutes, he led them on a 30-mile chase through Houston in a red Camaro. He was driving so recklessly that he was hitting other vehicles. Zavea was not in a car seat, nor was she in a seat belt, which means she was being tossed around the car as he sped through traffic. But while all this is happening, Kirsten is trying to call him from her mother's phone because her mother worked at the same Walmart. So when all this had broke out initially, that's who she had ran to use her phone. The police placed her in the back of the squad car while they were still actively chasing DeAndre. Kirsten's father arrived at the scene and he sat in the back of the squad car with her as well. And the two continued to try to call DeAndre from her mother's phone. While they were sitting there, DeAndre finally decides to call back, but on FaceTime, while he's actively being chased by the police, he's on FaceTime with Zavea in his lap. The 2-year-old was gasping for air, and she also had blood all over her face. DeAndre had his hand around her neck, and he was squeezing tighter and tighter. Kirsten is begging him to stop. She told him that your daughter loves you. Why are you doing this? And his response was, you don't love me. You only love that man. You did this to her. This is what you made me do. All you care about is that man. Kirsten started yelling, he's killing her. She's crying hysterically. Her father took the phone trying to reason with DeAndre, and that's when he put the camera on the lifeless body of his 2-year-old daughter. The chase finally ended in a church field in Northwest Harris County. It was a 20-minute standoff with SWAT. When they finally decided to move in for the capture, DeAndre was unharmed, but Zavea was unresponsive. They performed CPR at the scene and she was then airlifted to a hospital, but she was pronounced dead on arrival. Her cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head and strangulation. DeAndre Flanagan was charged with capital murder and his bond was set at $2 million. He pled not guilty and his trial started in January of 2025. His defense team tried to argue that Zavea's death was an accident and that she only died because she wasn't strapped in a car seat or a seat belt. Basically, she died because of his reckless driving, but still, it's still you. You're still at fault. You're still the reason. After a 3-day trial, they deliberated less than 2 hours, but right before the jury was about to read him his fate, DeAndre lashed out in the courtroom, knocked over news cameras. He had injured a photojournalist. They had to tackle his ass and put him down. On January 10th, 2025, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. So now what? Now what? You would never be in a relationship with a woman for the rest of your life. You stupid motherfucker. And you did all that. Killed your own child, your own flesh and blood. Because you think her mama was dating somebody. That lady said she wasn't even dating nobody. Enjoy your same-sex relationships now. Rest in peace to this baby. This case pissed me off, Yellow Tape. What y'all think?